to do some 3D camera tracking. So what we end up with is, hopefully that doesn't screw everything up. Oh, interesting. Okay. Let's see. I don't know. Okay, I was gonna try to get rid of these so you couldn't see. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay, cool. So we're gonna talk about how we can track something in 3D space super well, way quicker, way more accurate, and way better than what we tried to do for like 5 freaking hours before. To be fair, most of that was actually rotoscoping, but yeah, this is gonna be much better. So what we're gonna do, let's go back to the beginning over here, and this would default be at 100%, so I'm gonna put it back. Okay, so basically we're gonna throw our footage in there, and it's very important. Didn't think about this before, but do not stabilize your footage, because when you think about it, stabilizing your footage is taking the tracking data, the camera data, pixel motion data, and it's going to smooth out your footage, right? So then if you try to throw another tracker on top, so you're now trying to track footage that has already been tracked and stabilized, it's kind of like making a copy of a copy of a copy. So let's go back to the original and leave less room for error. So that was just me not thinking when we were doing this before. So yeah, so you got your footage on the timeline, trim it to wherever you want it to be, so that way this process is quicker, so you're not tracking needless data. So maybe you want more than what I put on the timeline, but I just put this much in here. So now what we'll do, we got your footage selected, go to animation, go to track camera, and that is going to bring up into your effects control panel your 3D camera tracker. So you're going to want to do variable zoom. We're not actually zooming, but we have I guess like a dolly push where we're moving through the space, so we've got a little bit of zoom as far as this is concerned. 3D solved is important. Render track points, I don't think that's like super important. I just always keep it there. Under advanced, always check detailed analysis. It's not going to be checked. Auto delete points across, not sure what that does exactly. I could go into what I think it does, and I'm pretty sure we need it, but I'm not going to do that to save time. Auto detect, typical mostly flat scene tripod pan. Just do auto detect. The software knows your footage better than you do. Probably, I don't know, it knows it better than I do, so yeah, so that's what you need there. Average error 2.63 pixels, so that's cool. We're working with 4K footage here, and on average it's like gonna be off no more than 2.63 pixels, which is like fantastic. That I think will only show up after you have fully rendered it, but basically it's gonna work the same as a subspace warp, or I think it's called a warp stabilizer. It's going to work the same way. Basically, you put it up here, you change all your stuff, and then it's going to start analyzing. You're going to have that little blue banner across the screen here, say analyzing, and then it's going to solve. And then once it's done solving, you're going to end up with this. So you got a whole bunch of little track points on the screen. If you go to your track point size, we can blow those up a little bit. So let's move those up to like 500%. So what we're doing here is quite a bit different than when we were tracking the individual pixels before with our little white boxes. So this is looking at 3D space a little bit more accurately, and as you can see here, it's trying to figure out, you can see that little target thing, which that's you can increase your target size if you wanted to. You know, that doesn't actually affect anything other than like you're visually being able to see what's going on here. But basically, like, imagine this is like a disc, and if you were to put the disc in this actual space, like right there for instance, it would sit on top of that tree line that's right here, right? So that's pretty accurate. What we're looking for is something that's facing us directly. So something that's going to be oh, that was perfect. Not quite perfect, almost, like right here. So if I zoom in just so you can kind of see, well, that's a lot. See what's going on. It's selecting 3 track points based off of where your cursor is, and trying to figure out which track points to use. Now you have a couple options. You can go with the default, or you can select your own track points. So let's say I wanted to use this point, and then you click on it, and then shift click, and then shift click, at least 3, but you can even do more. And it's gonna like try to, based off of this little area, and I mean, depending, like, you got to be real selective here. Depending on which ones you select, it's gonna get hella confused. So I think when I did this before, I didn't select them myself. I just let it kind of go through here. So let's zoom out a little bit. Let's see if we can find a good, I think it was over here. I found a pretty good one. Okay, so this is pretty good. Now what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to see if I add this one. Okay, that makes it worse. We're just going to try to make this as like straight and head on as possible. So wow, that's like almost perfect potentially. Drop the target size down. Doesn't matter. I'm just kind of looking, see what's going on. So that looks pretty damn good. So now we're going to go to one of our selected track points, or like kind of in our little target area here. We're going to right click, and we're going to do, you could do create text in camera, solid in camera. It doesn't matter. We're going to end up deleting either the text, solid, null, or I don't even know what the heck, shadow catcher. Don't do shadow catcher, camera, and light. That's too many things. But one of these three, I'm going to do null or solid just for this case. And it's going to create our solid. So you got the solid there. And it's going to create a 3D camera tracker. So basically our job is like already done. I'm going to kind of explain what's happening here just so you can understand in your workflow moving forward. So before, we made some track data, which was basically creating keyframes for our position, rotation, and scale. And then we could apply those directly to whatever we want. In this case, we would have wanted it here on our track solid. One thing you'll notice is under our transform, we have like no keyframes. It literally doesn't affect anything on here. And what's really cool is, let's say I wanted to create another, I wanted to track 2 things in this space. It will track both of them without even having to do anything. You just add it into the space. And the reason that's happening, you'll notice over here we've got our 3D box checked. So this is a 3D layer. Doesn't mean that it has 3D dimensions, but it means it's moving around in 3D space. This 2D plane is moving around in 3D space. And then we've got our camera tracker. Now in here is where all of our keyframes are. So instead of moving individual objects, it's moving our point of view based off of the camera movement that is happening in real life. So it's trying to match that as well as possible. So I think if I go over to view here, I can kind of show you. Let's do switch view layout. We'll go to 2 views, and then we've got like a top-down view over here. So I think if I, perfect. Okay, so if you zoom out a little bit, you can see this is our camera. And what we're seeing over here on the left is based off of the point of view of our camera here. So you can see our camera is like slowly changing. And so we've got our, if we go to our track solid here, I think, yep, there it is. So in 3D space, there is our solid, or whenever we want to, our background. And we are seeing this, or this over here, based off of our camera that is moving. Pretty freaking sick, if you ask me. Now there's a couple things we can do, and let's go back to one view, and perfect. Also, interesting thing you can do, if you so if you go over to our, you can click on this thing, it should say active camera, just in case you accidentally do this. We do front. First of all, it's yeah, it's not going to show us anything, which is kind of funny. I could go into why, but that's giving us a point of view that is not related to our 3D camera tracker. So you'll want to go to 3D tracker camera, and it's going to show us a point of view of the camera. The reason you know what it's, I mean, you could change this to, I don't know, say bubbles. You just named your camera layer bubbles for whatever reason. And now you just want to make sure that you click on that. So what you're seeing in your preview here is going to be related based off of our camera. That's right there. So we got a couple different options and some things that we need to look at. So depending on how our track goes, say sometimes when you're tracking, and this happened whenever I sent you that little preview video, it like wasn't able to track after a certain point. It just lost it and it wasn't able to solve. This time it did solve pretty well. But what can happen, let's kind of run preview this and see, we might get it might be not very accurate at a certain point. So it's actually, looks like it's doing a really good job. But at a certain point, let's say like right here, it's just not accurate and our little square just flies off the screen. So it's like, oh, okay, well our camera just got janked up. So what you can do is you can, with your, let's call this camera. With your camera layer selected, you can hold Option, right bracket, and we're just going to trim it down. And then what you could do is you could go back, click on your track data here. Let's say I wanted to track a new point. Oh. And this is in theory. I actually haven't done this yet, but I think this will work. So let's say we chose right there. We can go ahead and create... can I not create a new camera? Okay, can't create a new camera. So I guess if it gets all... What? Interesting. Okay, well, that's fine. What you would have to do if we needed to create a new camera would be basically delete the camera tracker. You don't need that anymore because we have our camera, which has all of the data already applied. And then you would just track the space again and then create a new camera that fits a little bit better, right? And then what would happen is you would have to create new camera in solid. You would just delete the new solid that was created. In fact, in this case, like again, no data was applied to our track solid here, so we could just delete that, and that's fine. Let's go over to our background. You got to check it to make sure that it's 3D. If you wanted to, doesn't, well, yeah, actually, this would be a good idea. Let's pre-compose this, and let's call this background bin, because that's gonna hold our background. Doesn't matter which one of these is checked. I just usually check move all attributes in a new composition. Usually, it's not what I told you to do earlier when I was giving you advice on the can, but in this case, doing that actually doesn't matter in this case either way. I just usually like to do that. So let's see, let's go back in here. Let's not make this 3D. Scale it up. I think there should be like a fit to, I don't know, it's not that important. Let's just scale this up to like right there. Sure, sounds good. Go back to our render comp, and then you're going to want to, on your background bin composition, make it a 3D layer. So now it's going to track in space, in a 3D space. So then you have that in there. So what's cool is we can position this wherever we want to with whatever scale. You could even add in some keyframes if you wanted to. Not that you would, but you could. And position this and scale it however you want. So now from here, it's the same process. We're going to rotoscope, cush out, and we've got our track in here. So everything is nice and crispy. Other options that you may want to do. So what we talked about, there's this parallax effect in 3D space, right? So the things that are really close to the camera are going to move, you're going to see them move a little bit more than the background. The farther something is, the less it's going to be affected by the camera movement. So if we go into our background bin here, we go over to transform, and we go to position. So you can see it's like positioned on this third axis, which would be X, Y, the Z axis, I think. You can push it back. So if we're getting a little bit too much motion, we can just push it back in space. Quick little tip here: you can click and then shift, and it's going to increase those numbers 10 times quicker. Shift is the multiply by 10 button usually. And so now if we play through this, we're going to see a little bit less motion. And actually, you can kind of tell it's tracking with the background here just a little bit better than what it was before. But for an inverse example, let's move it like really close to the camera. Say like really close. By really close, I mean much closer. It's still not going to be that much closer. See, it feels like it's much closer because we're getting a lot more motion with it. So, wow, that's crazy how good that looks, honestly. Those are our options. Now, you may want to, I don't know if you want to or not, but you may want these two views so you can look at the camera and you can look at where everything is in 3D space. So if you go over to view up here, now I have mine down here. It's not always going to be down here depending on how much you have open. So over here you could potentially do two views. If you don't see it over there, you just go over to view, you go to switch view layout, and you can do two views. You can do four views, two is all we need here. And you can see we've got our top view and you've got our active camera view. So we want to keep the active camera so we can see what our final render is going to look like. And then under top view, if it's not on top, you can change it over here to top. It should default. Select that. Let's zoom out. And now we can actually, cool thing you can do, we can click on our layer and then let's move it. Is it in the Y space? Yeah, okay, so it's in the Y space. You can move it like this and we can see where it's at in relation to the camera, which is another option. So you can play around with that, and that's how to like 3D track and throw things in the background. Ideally, this is what you do every time. The only reason I didn't try to do this before was because I didn't think it would be able to track over here. But it was, which is freaking amazing. So yeah, if you got any questions, let me know. I know this was a really long video, but I hope it helped.